So first things first, we're going to start off with our pleated pocket. So take your accent, your pleated pocket accent piece, and we'll put the line into the side for a moment. Check that directionally it's the right way up, and I'm going to flip it. So directionally it's still the right way up, but I'm looking at the wrong side. I'm just going to make some marks for my magnetic prongs. Magnetic snap prongs, I should say. So we are making a mark that is 1 1/4 in from the edge and 2 3/4 down. So I'm using my quilting ruler to help me, but if you need to, draw a line and then measure. Absolutely fine. Yes, I am using a pen because all of my fabric pens have decided to stop working. So again, 1 1/4 in, 2 3/4 down. And then grab one of your washers, lay it over so your mark is in the center, and mark the position for your prongs. Now I'm just going to cut these using my seam ripper. Very carefully, you don't want to make bigger holes than you need. Now what I'm going to do is to help stabilize the fabric, is I'm going to support it with just a scrap of this Decaville that I have. You can use absolutely anything. If you want to, you can cut up a few squares of interfacing, stick them one on top of each other on here, in this area, mark it again, just to add a bit of strength if you wish, if you don't have any of this. Dear. So I've got 2 for this piece. And it just needs to be bigger than your washer, but also when you bend the prongs, bigger than where the prongs are going to be. So if you've got long prongs on your snap, you need a longer piece of supporting. I'm just cutting out the holes on these 2. Right, so mine's a bit of a jumble here. Now, depends on what you call these, innie bit, outie bit, male, female. Your magnetic snap comes in 2 pieces. So you've got one that's got a sticky out bit and one that's got a sticky in bit. So we want this one that goes in. Sometimes it's a bit thicker, but either way, the one with the indent or dimple. Oops. And obviously we need both of those. So from the right side, if you need to, I've just got a bit of free stop here. Oh, bit generous with that. Just putting that over the, that's my dog, over the prong holes. And then from the right side, I'm having such a pickle right now. There we go. There we go. And then on the wrong side, we want our bit of support and washer. Now, how you bend your prongs is completely up to you. You might bend them in, you might bend them out. Completely up to you. As they are close to the seam, I'm going for innies today. If I was putting them in a flap, which I will do next, I'll probably bend them outwards just to get a thinner profile. There we go. And then last but not least, now if you want to trim up your supporting bit, you can. Otherwise, don't worry about it, just leave it. So just make sure that when you flip this over, it stays directionally the right way up. Because we don't want to spin this around and then have the snaps in the wrong place. So grab your lining and right sides together. Make sure obviously that's directionally the right way up. And then we're going to sew across the top using a regular seam allowance. There we go. And then all I'm going to do is press this flat. Avoid the magnets, do not iron over those. And then I'm going to fold this back on itself. Roll it between my fingers and then give it another press. Okay. And then once you've pressed it, top stitch across your seam. There we go, top stitch. What I'm also going to do is to base stitch across this bottom edge, just so they don't shift during the next part. There we go. Oh, wrong side away. Now, time for a little measuring. So I'm going to grab my pins to help me with this next part. If I grab my ruler again, I'm going to measure in 4 inches from the side edge. Now you can use your cutting mat to help you, is generally what I do, and it is quicker. Just lay it on your cutting mat, line it up. Now, if you've used a fabric that can't be pinned, you could use washi tape or erasable fabric marker if you know that it is truly erasable on your fabric, because this is visible. Now, all we're going to do is these parts at these folds need to bend back on themselves. So this one, if I pinch where the pins are, I can fold that back and give it a press, and then the same with this one. So at the pins, I'm folding it. Feel free to do one side at a time. So the magnetic snaps are on this side now. That's all I'm going to do, is give this a press down here. So be careful when you're pressing that you don't iron over these snaps. So I've taken my pins out, but you can move them over if you need to. If you were doing one side, yours would just look like that for a minute. But what I'm going to do is top stitch down these folds using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I find I've done a lot of pleats. I do find it sits nicer with a larger top stitch. So I'm going to do that on both. I'm just going to trim my stray threads a second. And there we are. So yours will look something like that. So grab your outer body piece. You want the front one. Now the front one is wider than the outer body back piece. So just make sure that this is the wider one. And we're going to lay this on top. So what we're going to do is when we're matching at the bottom edge here, as well as the sides. So start on your left side, match up your left side edge, and make sure it's in line with the bottom edge as well. And then we're going to match up the right side edge, or edges I should say. And then lay the pleats, sort of flatten them down and position them so that they are even, or look even. If you want to use a ruler, feel free, just to make sure that they are level. But what I'm looking for myself is just to make sure this gap between the pleat and the magnetic snap is even, because I know that these are in the right place. So if I look at that, I'm just going by eye, but by all means measure them to check that they are the same. And then what I'm going to do is base stitch down the sides along the bottom and on this side edge as well. Now I know that these are the same by matching, so it looks level. So I don't want anything to shift whilst I'm sewing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the bottom and go halfway across, and then I'm going to turn it over and sew. So I'm always sewing from the top. Then I know that when I go around, nothing's going to shift. The base stitch within the seam allowance at around about 1/4 of an inch. There we go, like so. And if you need to, just give that a bit of a press just to hold those pleats together, but bear in mind to watch out for these. Don't want to heat them. So, now we can start adding our side wings and whatnots. So you've got your front pieces here. I've actually written on mine so I know which way it should go. But if you're worried, I mean, it's not going to fit. If you think you're going to get it wrong, it's not going to fit. It can only fit size wise this way. And same with this one. So just make sure I'm just double checking that I've got the right one. Yeah, all good. So what I'm going to do is take my right front side piece and lay it right sides together with the right edge. Lots of rights. Right. I'm going to sew these together using a regular seam allowance. And once you've sewn it together, flip that piece over, press it if you can, but with all seams facing this side edge. We're going to top stitch here. Like that. And I'm going to do the same on this side, but obviously opposite way. So left onto here. And sew them together using seam allowance. And then same again, open it up with all the seams facing the side edge. We're going to top stitch. There we go. And that is that bit done. We just need to add our flap. But find my pattern piece. Before we make the flap, obviously things happen during sewing, you know. Just want to check that these match up with what we're going to draw on our flap piece. So what I've done is I've folded mine, fold it either way, it doesn't matter, and just check that your guides are even or the same distance as your snaps. If one is off slightly, so it was too far in or too far out, just make adjustments on this piece to match, and then when we put the flap on, you know that it will still snap, because there's no point copying this if this one's out. So to have a check, fold it over, check that your guides for your centre of your snap washers match up with the centres of the snaps on the body. If they do, amazing. If they don't, just adjust them accordingly. but there we go. I'm just going to put that up out of the way for a second and grab your flap lining. Now your flap outer is the accent one, and what you should have already done is fused your fleece centrally on the piece. This gives the flap a bit of feel to it, gives it a bit of weight, and also helps protect this piece from the washers that we're putting in here. So that's your accent, and then on the lining. If you've had to make new positions for your washers, use those. That's absolutely fine. But what I'm going to do is mark. I'm actually popping a hole through the paper. And that is the centre of our washers. Now we're going to install these exactly the same as we did with the pleated pocket. Except this time I'm just going to do mine on an angle, just so I know that when I'm doing all of my stitching and whatnot, I know I'm not accidentally going to sew over a prong. If you are worried about that, you can bend them inwards, but just because I want a lower profile, I'm going to bend them outwards so that they're nice and flat. Now where's a seam ripper when you want one? Hiding. Again, I've marked and cut the holes for the prongs. On the back, I'm going to add a bit of fray stopper. And then I've got my remaining halves of my magnetic snaps again. So I'm just going to grab some Decaville. And then same again. This is to help stabilize the fabric. On washers, and then personal preference whether you're bending out or bending in. And even though there is fusible fleece, which more so, I wouldn't say protects, but stops you feeling these. I'm adding these to stop the prongs coming through. Now one last thing before we fix these two flat pieces together. This is very naughty of me because I'm still carrying on with the pen. Use your fabric marker if you've got one. I'm just drawing my seam allowances for these points. So I've got my ruler, I'm measuring in 3/8 or 1 centimetre, whichever unit of measurement you're using. And this way I know that when I sew from here, when I get to this marker, I know I need to turn, and when I get to here I need to turn. The same on this side, I know where I need to pivot, and this will help me get lovely even sharp corners. So I'm going to place these together. I know I never clip anything, but I will these pieces. So I'm going to sew all the way around except this top edge. Leave that edge open for turning. So using regular seam allowance. Oh, sorry, noisy me. Alright, so I've stitched them together. Now, before we turn this the right way out, we're just going to trim off some bulk off the corner. So I'll do it on this side where you can see. So we've got these angles here. I'm just going to cut them off. And maybe trim the seam allowance. That one is not necessary, but it's up to you. There we go, I've trimmed the bulk off the corners. Now I'm just going to turn this the right way out. Now find whatever you use to poke out the corners. Normally I use a pencil. I'm going to very carefully use my awl to get really crisp corners. Now I don't want to poke the stitches through, but I just want some nice sharp corners. You do poke it through, just poke it back. There we go. Some real nice corners there. And then all we're going to do is give it a press, but here's the but. Do not press on these snaps. So I suggest pressing from this side so you can see what you're doing. Press around it. Don't go anywhere near these because we have got the tape, which is obviously gluey. So don't want to heat that up. Don't want to heat these up either because they won't work. So let's do that. There we go. So these snaps are right on the edge here. So if you've got a large foot on your machine, you may want to top stitch this next part using a zipper foot. What we're going to do is top stitch all the way around this time. Yeah, I'm just going to press that. There we go. So I have fused it. Now we're going to top stitch all the way around the outsides this time, including the top edge. Now because these snaps are quite close to the edge, if you've got a large foot on your machine, you may need to use your zipper foot for this part, or a narrow foot. But this is obviously the reason why we made these at a diagonal. But just have a feel. It's absolutely fine to use the zipper foot. I'm going to top stitch all the way around this time, this way up, so that I can just check on what I'm doing. But also, I find, especially I've got a metal plate on my machine here, this obviously wants to stick. Sometimes it can make your stitches all a bit wibbly wobbly. So let's do this. There we go, top stitching loveliness. So I had to actually have my foot slightly on my magnetic snap, but just because I did a larger top stitch. But I do recommend standard top stitch for this one, which is like 3 mils, 1/8. If you are worried about these wings, you can go back in before you top stitch and bend the prongs inwards. That is that. And now we're going to pop it on here. So just have a check. Do they line up? Yes, they do. You will notice that this is higher. That is okay, because when we're stuffing our pocket, if it's all flat and lovely, you're not going to get much in there. So what I'm going to do, behave, is make sure that this is level. Level with the top, centered on the top if yours happens to be bigger or smaller than the panel. And then when it snaps, it just has a little bubble. But that's okay because it's for stuffing. I'm going to base stitch across this top edge. There we go. So it will still catch the bottom of the magnet, so it will still stick when it's empty. Like I said, what have I got here? When it's stuffed, it's going to work better. So closes. So that is the front. Now, I'm not going to do the connectors till after, because in the pattern it does say to copy the method the same. So we'll do the connectors after. So grab all the bits you need for the back. So I've got my outer body back piece, which I don't need just yet. I've got my zipper pocket accent and 3 zipper pocket lining pieces. And I've got my zipper and my tabs. So zipper first. Now, if you've got continuous zipper or you've got one with the little tabbies on the end, whichever, it needs to be an exact 7-inch measurement. So trim it down if needed. what we're going to do is make a little sandwich with our tabs. So I've got one upwards. I'm going to lay that on here. Lay the second one right side down. So the tabs are right side together with the zipper in the middle. Butterfingers. And I'm going to sew them together along this edge using a regular seam allowance. And then once you've done that, pull them outwards like that and top stitch. So press first if you need to, and once I've top stitched, I'm also going to baste these ends together. Something that looks like that. And I'm just going to do the same to the other side. So I'm going to make this zipper tab sandwich. Seam allowance, open it up, top stitch, baste. Bring my machine in so you can actually see what I'm doing. Oh, slippery suckers. There we go. Just trimming off these bits. I can't stand bits everywhere. Right, so we're going to start off with your zipper pocket accent piece. Make sure it's directionally the right way up. Zipper preference, up to you. I'm going to put mine on the left and I'm going to place it right side down. If your tabs are longer than your zipper piece, don't worry, just center it. But we're going to pop it along this top edge here, line it up. If it helps, you can trim down your tabs so that they are the same width as your zipper. I'm going to baste across the top along the edge. So I normally say within the seam allowance, but along the edge, because seam allowance obviously depends on what size zipper you're using. So along the edge, we shall say. So as you can see, I went from one side right to the other. Then grab one of your lining pieces, make sure it's directionally the right way up, and place it right sides together, matching up the top edge. What I'm going to do is I am actually going to trim my tabs down so that they are in line, and this will help me line up the next piece. There we go. So make sure it matches up with the zipper accent piece, level with the top. Now I'm going to sew together using seam allowance. If you are using a number 5 zipper, so a wider one like I'm using, you can use a 3/8 seam allowance. If you're using a smaller number 3 zipper, use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I've just swapped over to a narrow foot, So swap your feet if you needed, narrow foot or zipper foot. And then we can sew these together using your chosen seam allowance. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is, now I've stitched them together, I'm going to fold these back, give them a press away from the zipper if needed, and then top stitch. I am going to give mine a little press because they're not plain ball. There we go, like that one. And then we're going to do the same again. So we've sandwiched on this side of the zipper. Now we need to make a sandwich on this side. So grab one. And place it right side together. Match up the side edges and the top edge with the raw edge of the zipper. Yeah, and as we did before, baste stitch them together. Basted to that one, stitched, that's a word. And then the same on this side. And this one is the one we use our chosen seam allowance. So depending on the size of your zip, it's going to be either a 1/4 inch or 3/8. If you're not sure, go for 1/4 inch. Then find out where they are, pieces that you've just sewn. Again, press if needed. And then top stitch. So I'm going to press mine and then I'll top stitch. There we go. Just going to cut these off. No reason, absolutely no reason for it, just cutting them off. You were looking at me funny. Right. So we're going to reduce some bulk here. So we're going to take, imagine if this was a complete pocket here. I'm going to take these 2 inside pieces. Or if that's confusing, this side I've got an outer and a lining, or an accent lining. This side I've got 2 lining pieces. Take the 2 lining pieces together. And sew them together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so totally forgot what I was doing halfway through and started doing a 3/8 again. So I went over it a second time. And I'm just going to trim this up nice and short. So I've left about 1/8 on there, nice and short. Now bring these down now so that the bottom pieces meet. Don't worry about this inside pocket for now. We're just bringing these outer pieces to meet. And then I'm going to flatten this panel. If you need to now, you can gently pull the lining inside pocket down. What you want is for these zipper tabs to be even. So I've got half of it on that side, half and half. You don't want it rolled so it's like that. We want them pinched in half. And then base stitch around all three sides. If you've got any bits like mine that are a bit wibbly wobbly, don't worry, we can trim them up after. There you go. Now if you want to, on your cutting mat, just check that this is level. So there we go, now it fits. Outer body back piece on. I've got the bottom edges leveled up, sides are level. More basting. Because it's on a purpose based. Right, just check that these bits are even. Because if they're not, you can shimmy this round a bit so that it's nice and level. So again, with my basting, I start at the top, I do half, I flip it over and I start at the top and do half. And that way I know that nothing's gonna move around. So baste together within the seam allowance. There we go. And now we can start adding our wings. There we go. So just checking, I've got back written on both of these. All good. So exactly the same process that we did the front. So you will notice that it will only fit the one way. So it's flat edge at the bottom, angled at the top. It will not fit this way or this way. It won't fit. It will only fit this side, which is good. I'm going to start with this side, right sides together. Now, as we've already done this process, I'm going to do it a bit quicker. I'm going to sew using seam allowance, I'm going to open it, and then I'm going to top stitch. There we go, like so. And then the same again. Level it up, it will only go one way. Seam allowance, open, top stitch. There we go, like so. Now, if you're worried about the pocket gaping open, you can sew a little triangle here. So go along seam allowance, the stitch line, and then down and back up again. If you want to hide the ends, you obviously could have done it in the step before. I should have said, slap my wrist. Or add a rivet. If you're adding a rivet here, just below the tab, you will need to stabilise the back of here. Either using a scrap of Decaville, a scrap of foam, whichever, but because this is just one layer, you will need to stabilise it. I'm not going to do either because mine doesn't feel gapey, it feels nice and snug and okay. So now we've done the back, we can go back and do the connector tabs. So I've got two pieces here. Now, depending on your fabric, you might be able to fold these in half to find the long centre line. I am measuring and marking mine. Also accidentally drawing on my table. Oops. And then everything's gone walkabout today. Oh. Nope, just right in front of my eyes. Double-sided tape I'm going to use. Or if your fabric allows, you can fold it in half and give it a press. So it looks like this. Wow. I say it will look like this, I missed a step. So once you've got that centre fold, you're going to bring the raw edges in to the fold or the line and then press again so that it looks like this. I don't know. Eat scissors. Come on. Yeah. A case of dropsies today. And then all I'm going to do is top stitch down the long side of both of these. There we go. I'm just going to grab my D-rings and snap hooks. Now the snap hooks go on these parts and it allows you to use it as a waist bag, as in around your waist, not waist bin. And you can also clip it to your belt hoops. I really want to try it on a saddle because that would be amazing. But if it's for you, you're not worried about that and you want to save some pennies, add O-rings and then you can clip your strap directly onto there, and this allows for movement. Obviously rectangular rings, you're a bit restricted, you'll have to bend the strap. O-rings give the strap a bit more movement. So if you want to save money, save money, use O-rings. I'm going to use snap hooks, so one on each. and then I'm going to baste the ends together, and I'll do that on both. There we go, so the seam allowances are hidden on the inside. I'm just grabbing my ruler, and what I want to do is measure in a 1/2 inch. Sorry, yeah, 1/2 inch, and mark on here. I'm doing that on both very noisily. Now grab your front piece, the piece with the flap. Oh, come on, machine, that way. And on the end here, I'm going to place my D-ring like this, centered on this angled piece, with the 1/2 inch overlapping, or overhanging I should say. If you need to measure, by all means do measure, just to check that it is centered. I'm going to do the same on this side. I'm going to center it. Got my 1/2 inch overhang. And then I'm going to baste together within the seam allowance of this part here. Right, we are ready. Oh my gosh, so noisy. To do our final bit of construction. Now, it is okay to draw any seam allowances. Now, because I have this all centered and nice, I'm going to draw them on here. So I'm going to very noisily turn this over. And I know what you're thinking, why didn't you draw these on before you added the hooks? That would have made more sense. I'm just drawing where my needle needs to pivot. I know. If this is too tricky, by all means do it on the other one. And I'm also going to draw down here. Gosh, I hope you aren't watching this in bed and, you know, peace and quiet with me banging around the place. Right, what I'm also going to draw on is my turning gap. So somewhere in the middle, I'm going to do, well, if I measure up 2 inches from this side and 2 inches from this side, that gives not much at all. Hang on. Ignore me for a moment. That's better. 1.5 up, 1.5 down. Ignore that one. That's going to be my turning gap. I am also, and this is a lovely trick from one of my testers, between the lines, I'm drawing a 3/4 inch. I'm also going to match that on its opposite counterpart here. If you're not sure which one it is, you can draw on both. This is a cool little tip for you. This will massively help leveling up your side. So, place these right side together and clip them together. As many clips as you want. My flap is trying to make a break for it at the top, so I'm just making sure it's level. Now, obviously this clip is very close to this edge, so when it comes to it, just push it over, sew up the side, and then you can bring it back for sewing up this edge so it's nice and level. Push it over for the sides, bring it back. If you're worried, you can use a zipper foot to sew all around the outside. Absolutely fine, or a narrow foot. But we're going from that 1.5 inch marker, which I measured wrong to start with because I don't read my own instructions. So I had a thought came into my head whilst I was actually sewing. Obviously O-rings are going to be much bigger if you're using these. You will need to use a zipper foot, or you can make your connector tabs longer, or even better, if you find the gated ones of these, you can take them apart. Even better again. It will be much harder because it takes up so much of that space to use a standard foot. Right, before we turn inside out, we need to remove bulk. Anything that any corners, trim them off. Don't trim off these little tabs. Ooh, don't go crazy cutting and nearly cut your stitches off. Don't forget, lots of don'ts, don't forget about these bottom corners. dun, dun. Right, here's the fun part. You know when I say that, you know it's not going to be actual fun. Reach through your turning up and find the hook on the opposite side, and you can use that to pull the end through. Just kind of roll everything on it in on itself. So you start to see it. Ooh. There you go. Ready? Put my arm through again, and I'm just pushing out these bottom corners. If you pull on the connector, that should help you with these top corners. Again, I'm putting on mine gently. Pushing out the bottom corner. And the last thing to do is our top stitch. Now you can see this line we drew here. This will help you if you need to use double-sided tape, absolutely fine, or you can clip the one line to your marker, flip it over, and then hopefully you did the right matchy one. I'm not using double-sided tape because I really don't want it in my stitches when I'm top stitching. And now I can match these up, these edges. There we go. When it comes to, wrong side, top stitching the top, lift the flap up. So press it if needed. Roll these edges between your fingers. Give them a little shoulder massage. If this bottom edge is too bulky, because there are quite a few layers, start from this corner here. It is made so that these joints are mismatched. So I've tried to avoid bulking these corners. So what I tend to do is start from this row of top stitching here, go up, across, all the way around, back down to here. And then we'll be ready to add some support to these connectors. So let's do the top stitching first. And there we have it, stitched. So all we need to do is our custom strap. Now I say custom because it all depends on how you're going to wear it. So do you want it as a sling bag on your back? Do you want it as a slimline handbag under your arm? Do you want it as a waist bag? If you want it as all three, then you need to make an adjustable strap. If it's for you, depending on how you want it, pop it on your body. See how it feels. See how your strap feels. Now, to make mine adjustable, I've done my strap as a 34-inch strap here. If I'm wearing it as a waist bag, I will probably just use the hooks. 34 allows me to wear it as a handbag and a sling. Now, feel free to watch the video on a guide to straps, and then you don't have to watch me now. But I'm just going to draw this up. Oh, what am I doing? Draw this up and then I'll tell you what I'm doing. So first things first, on your strap you will need a neat edge. So I've done these 3/4 inch lines in, and I'm going to fold them up, and you can either tape, glue, press or top stitch them in place. If you find this fold is too fiddly, measure up 1 inch and then give yourself a 1/2 inch fold to play with. I'm going to top stitch mine now because I found that I wasn't getting as neat edges that I like with all the double-sided tape. There we go. So we've got these neat edges. Now, depending on your fabric, you will either press, fold and press to find this long centre line, or measure and mark like I have. Now, obviously this is all in a guide to long straps. So if you wanted to watch that rather than watch me now, up to you. But I promise this won't take long. So once you've marked or folded to find your centre line, you're going to bring the raw edges into the centre. So you can either press again, or use glue, or use double-sided tape like I'm using. I'm trying to stay away from where I'm stitching, but also because I'm using faux leather, I'm not folding all the way to my centre line. I'm leaving a little gap, and this will help reduce the bulk and the thickness of the centre line and allow things to fold around. I'm just trying to work quickly because my tape does not want to stick today. So you might be pressing yours in to the centre line, or you might be doing what I'm doing. You might be having a cup of tea. And then once we are in this place, we can fold once more. And you see, because I left that gap, it folded so much easier than trying to squish the layers in. So you might press and fold again. You might use another bit of double-sided tape, but we are getting this lovely fold here. And then what we're going to do is sew around all 4 edges once it's folded. So top stitch. Like I said, my double-sided tape is not playing ball, so I am just going to go ahead and hold it and hope. That's about right, really. Right, so I just grabbed my other bits and pieces. Trim off any threads, and also the bit where my bobbin ran out, and you totally didn't see that. Now, if, like me, you have one end of your strap that doesn't look quite so hot, don't panic. We are going to hide that in the strap slider. What I'm going to do is fold this over. Now there is a measurement in the instructions, I think. Let me just check. So it does say to measure in 4 inches and fold. If you have a wide foot on your machine and you need a bit more room to maneuver, by all means make that fold bigger. If, like me, you are just going to add a rivet, oh crikey, like so, by all means do measure and mark so it's tidy. Just add a rivet in here. Now I'm going to grab one of my D-rings, slide onto the end. Did I say what else to do if you're not adding a rivet? I don't know. If you're not adding a rivet, you may wish to sew a box with an X. You'll find that on step 40. Then add a D-ring and weave it, end of your strap through the slider. So you've enclosed your D-ring on one end. Get to here. Make sure, if you're following along, we're going to fold it this way this time. So add on your D-ring, measure it and mark it if needed. But make sure that if this was the back of your slider, that is where your fold is going to be. So it's the same side. And then add more rivets or sew on the box again. Step 40. And that's ready to clip on. Now, one last thing I didn't show you was how to add support. So if needed, you could add a box here, draw it out first, use washi tape, erasable marker, whichever, or you can go ahead and measure and mark your rivet position. This is why the strap connector is so long on the inside, so that you've got something to rivet through. Like that. So you rivet through the connector, that gives this a bit of strength. There we go. So obviously if you were using the O-rings, when it came to this part here, you would have weaved it through your O-ring there and then back over. That's a good way of saving money, so you don't have to buy all these bits, you just buy in the O-rings. Generally they come in a pack of 4, so that covers 2 bags. Awesome. There are other ways if you wanted to make this adjustable and you weren't worried about all this shebang. And what you could do is put the slider on one of these and have a long strap coming out this side, and then you would just weave it through. It's another great way of saving money, and that would be great for a waist bag, but it wouldn't conform to your body the way that the O-rings and these ones do, because this moves all which ways. There are lots of ways of doing it to save on the pennies, depending on which way you're going to wear it. But 2 different ways. This way is completely adjustable, all styles. This way would make a really nice handbag or sling bag without big expense. Up to you. So many ways. But there we have it. Ta-da! Any questions? Pop me a comment. Come over to the Facebook group. But there we have it. Ziggy adjustable sling bag.